Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm an author and publisher at Red Penguin Books. We're a publishing company for authors of all types and genres. So if you would like to unleash your inner author, visit us at Red Penguin Books. Well, besides publishing books, I love to read books myself, and sometimes I don't have enough time to get into a book club. So I'm delighted to invite a book club onto the show with us today. We're going to be talking about Kristen Hannah's The Great Alone. I'm delighted to have them. Here's a nice picture so we can see Kristen Hannah's The Great Alone, and the Shayna Maidels will be joining us to discuss the book. So please welcome Cookie, who is, I guess, our moderator for the day, to invite all of these ladies on. Cookie, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. We're happy to be here.
So tell me a little bit about the Shayna Maidels.
Okay, the Shayna Maidels formed about at least 20 years ago. I'd say between 20 and 25, from a group of friends, and we've been together ever since. A couple of members have moved away, but in general, we're a very intact, happy group. We have a lot of fun, and usually we have a buffet that's equal to that of a wedding, but since of COVID, we haven't been doing that, but hopefully we'll return to that. I've been a reader since I'm a very small child. I used to walk to the library by myself in Brooklyn, New York to read, and read every book in the library, and I still continue to do that, or attempt to do so. So I'd like to introduce the rest of the group. Oh, one last thing. Please excuse my hair. I haven't been to a haircut since March.
I totally understand. It's pandemic hair. It's fine. And Cookie, before you introduce everyone, you have to promise me when this is all over that I can come to this grand feast. And I'm just going to bring the cameras there so we can do the show live one of these days with the cameras and the food, because it sounds way too good to me.
Oh yeah, you'll have a great time. Trust me, you'll never leave.
You'll put on weight.
That's right. Okay, here we go. So first up, Gail.
Good morning, Cookie. I'm Gail, and I'm a retired attorney here in Connecticut. And it's wonderful to be here with some of my favorite gals. And I'm not generally fond of coming-of-age novels. I find the plots to be formulaic and altogether too predictable. But I have to admit, I love this one. It had wonderfully colorful characters, and the setting in the Alaskan wilderness was stunning.
Fantastic.
Okay, Toby.
Hi, I'm Toby, and I am very glad to be here. And I will have to admit, I kind of joined in reading this book on the latter side, but I got through it. I loved it. And as Gail said, it was a very colorful depiction of Alaska. We had been in Alaska about 3 years ago, but not that part of Alaska. It was very, very civilized, the part obviously we went to, but this gave me a lot of insight into what the part that we did not see consists of, and I found it a very, very engrossing book.
Okay, Lisa.
Yes, first of all, Cookie, thanks for putting this together. This was a great idea. And, yes, and Stephanie, thank you for joining us. I think this is going to be a great time. So I work for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. I love this book group. We're more than just a book group. We're really good friends, and we do other things besides getting together to talk about books. As far as the book, I thought it was a fabulous book. It was a page turner. When we first decided on the book and I saw there were over 500 pages, I said, oh no, that's a long book. But actually, as I said, it's such a page turner that it took no time at all to read because I couldn't put it down. I really couldn't put it down. What?
I said, me too, me too.
Yeah.
Right, right. And I thought it was a story very much of not just about Alaska, but about unconditional love, and how that can affect people.
Okay, Patty. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, I'm Patty. I am the resident writer of the group, I guess. My work has appeared in the New York Times, New York Magazine, USA Today, the Hartford Courant. I had a book that came out about 3 or 4 years ago that was a memoir called The Adulterer's Daughter. And I don't know if you want us to talk about the book and our reaction to it quite yet, but I have to admit that I found it very, very difficult to read because there was a lot of abuse in my family when I was growing up, and I related to the relationship with the mother much too much, and it was almost unbearable to read for me. But I also couldn't put it down, I will say. Yes, and you know, I'll tell you more about that as we go along.
Okay, thank you, Beth.
I am Beth Fox. This is fun, and but while I'm watching you, I'm looking out on my yard waiting for rabbits and bunnies and cardinals and all that stuff, because I love nature, and that is one of the key reasons why I loved this book, because it gave you some insight into the world just goes on in the world of nature, in the world of the animal kingdom, regardless of what we're doing. And they know what their role in life is. And I found the book very aggravating in parts, because there were characters that I wish they would do something different. But for the most part, I found getting away from the stress and the irritation of what's going on now was so important to me. And this put me in a different place. And it was just mesmerizing that I could just be somewhere else. And the book helped me travel to somewhere else.
Thank you, Beth. Rita.
Hi, Cookie, thank you. As always, doing a great job. I read this book probably 3 years ago and loved it, and reread it again for now and loved it more. I just found this book so rich. The characters were so fabulous, and she just developed them so well. And for me, I've been to the Kenai Peninsula, and I've been in Homer, and I've been on that island.
Wow.
And I went fishing there, actually. So I really could picture this book was just so vivid in my mind. And plus my daughter lives in Seattle, so this book was very vivid. I loved the book. I thought the characters were they were just wonderful. It was, I couldn't put it down for the second time. I couldn't put it down. I loved it. And I love this book group. These people are wonderful. Every single woman in this group is fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rita. Sue.
Oh, me?
Yeah,
Okay.
you.
Hi. Yeah, I at first I had a hard time getting into the book, actually. And then I just couldn't stop. It just drew me in. A lot of this was about return to basics in this book, and I felt like it reminded me somewhat of where we are now with the virus, that we return to a lot of basics ourselves. And I found the book kind of painful, in terms of, some of the abuse that occurred in the book, etc. But I still was drawn in and wanted to see how it was going to play out. And I think we all live with things inside ourselves, but the way we react to them and what we do certainly speaks volumes. I would, strongly recommend this book to everyone. And, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to read it. I thought the language that the author used really created great pictures for us. And there's so many words that I think I highlighted because I wanted to be able to use them going forward. but it really was beautiful. And, at first I was like, what? They're going to Alaska? And it seemed like, someplace I would never want to go to, but in the end, certainly it changed.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Last but not least, Ruth.
Hi everyone. I'm Ruth, and again, Cookie, thank you. You've made our book group, you've enriched our book group with many chapters. No, you have. Really just dovetailing on what everyone said, I read this book several years ago and loved it. And some of us didn't remember that we read it until we picked it up and started it. And when we initially picked it about a month and a half, which I don't remember exactly, but I read it again. And just the other day, to be fresh for today, I started to go through it and skipping lots and lots of pages. I loved it. I think we have a lot to discuss in this book. Some of it is very, very, very sad and heartbreaking. It was a lot of things I thought were miraculous about it, but like I know we all agree. I love this book group. These women are smart and caring and just sensational, and have always and will always have a place in my heart and my life.
Ah, that's nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
That's true.
Did I cut
You're
you off?
welcome.
I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
I don't think so. No, you're good.
Okay. Well, and we are missing a few members. Renee, Nancy, Deanna. Am I missing anyone else? There was someone else. And Ava could not be here today, but they're with us in spirit, and I'm sure they'll all, I mean, they're not dead. Don't misunderstand me. They're with us in spirit. They just couldn't come today, but I'm sure they'll watch the video on YouTube and enjoy it. Anyway, so are we ready to begin?
We are.
Stephanie? Okay. Okay, first, I just wanted to say, as an introduction to Kristen Hannah, who I think is beyond talented. She's had so many wonderful books. Her family has a lodge in Alaska with another family, and that's how she got interested in writing about Alaska. The title of the book comes from a poem by Robert Service called The Shooting of Dan McGrew. And I'll just read you one line from that poem. It's long, so I won't bore you. Just, were you ever out in the great alone, where the mountain was awful cleary, and the icy mountains hemmed you in with a silence you most could hear? And that line basically refers to it's about the gold miners there, I guess, and it's about the cold, the loneliness, and being in Alaska. And I would encourage anyone to read the poem because it's very beautiful. Okay, so I see this book as a survival story, and it's not only surviving the Alaskan wilderness, but also surviving in an abusive family. And I was wondering, how would the rest of you categorize this? Would you say it's a love story, a nature story, a mother-daughter story? So anyone raise your hand and we'll see who wants to answer. Okay, Toby.
I think it's a love story between a mother and a child, and that's what I got out of it. I think the husband was a very abusive husband to both mother and daughter, and they both, I know the wife enabled him, but that's the crux of what I got from the book, between the mother and the daughter. Intense love and protection, and an enabler.
Well, let me say this for people who might be listening to the discussion who haven't read the book. This takes place when the father, Ernst, a Vietnam vet, has a lot of adjusting to society. And they decide to move to Alaska, where he thinks he'll be free of societal constraints and he'll be with nature and the land. And then he's okay in the summer. And then when it starts getting dark out and the days have 18 Hours of Darkness, he starts to fall apart and evolve back into his abusive state. And so the book goes on from there with many different trials and tribulations of what happens. But anyways, okay, so if you want to continue to ask my question, I just wanted to give a little background. So, okay.
Can I just say,
Yeah, go ahead.
in the beginning of the book, evidently, before he went to Vietnam, though, evidently he came home with PTSD. So that's what changed him. Before that, he had evidently not been like that. They constantly refer to him as being this kind, sweet man prior to that. So this really did change it. He couldn't help himself. He came home with this traumatic experience that he couldn't help himself. Go ahead.
Well,
I agree.
Yeah,
He came,
I did hear that again and again, but the question I had was, this was out of the mouth of his wife, and she constantly would support him no matter what he did to her. And I just wondered at times, was she painting a true picture of him before the war, or was she again sugarcoating it like she sugarcoated everything else he did during that his whole life?
I actually thought that he had his problems prior to the war.
That's what I
remember. Her parents hated him.
Right.
And why would they have hated him so much unless he had some of these problems prior to the war? I think the war just exacerbated all of these problems.
Her parents hated him because he wasn't of the same, I think he wasn't of the same socioeconomic status. Her mother was very status oriented. There's a lot of emphasis on how the home was and how it looked and so forth. And so I think that's why she hated him. You know, there's a quote in the beginning of the book that Cora makes. She says, "You don't stop loving a person when they're hurt." And I kept on challenging that, because just as the wilderness was a story of survival, this was a story of human survival. I mean, and even what's the girl's name? Lenny. Even Lenny had to choose. Does she go back to what's his name? Matthew. Or does she try to live a life without him? I mean, it's a question of what's more important to you, being there for somebody that you've committed to that's now ill and not the same person that you committed to, or trying to construct a life without them. So that's what I felt was the tension throughout the book.
Does anyone else want to comment? Because I can't see everybody's face.
Well, I was just going to say that he came back from the war scarred. I mean, literally and mentally scarred. And his friend, Bo, willed him or gave him this land. And that's how and why they got up to Alaska. There was a lot of sad things, how the kid, could never connect with anyone because they were never in a place very long. And when she got to Alaska, they weren't even sure there was a school. And that's where and how she met Matthew. But yes, the mother-daughter relationship, they needed each other desperately. Desperately. I thought the wife, though she was very devoted to her husband to a fault, though in the end we know what happened. So I don't know, her devotion went down the drain. It was sad. It was painful at times, because you just knew as you read that he was losing control of himself and he was going to really hurt her. But she behaved like every abused person. She denied it. She covered it up. She didn't go for help until it was too late.
Didn't that make you angry?
Yeah.
Yes,
Sad and angry.
I was livid that she couldn't, that she would rather be beaten to death than
And sometimes she egged him on because she was a very pretty woman and she would be very seductive
Right.
with Walker. I forget his name, but
Tom Walker.
Tom Walker.
Tom Walker.
And that would just enrage him, and then he would beat her.
yeah, I think anything would have enraged him, though.
Well,
Yep.
but
I
there were
really
times
didn't get
that
I didn't get the feeling that she was doing it intentionally. I think
Really?
that she was just sort of, if she was talking to Tom Walker, he would look at it very differently. Because
I thought there was a heat between them. They were very careful not to touch each other. And then don't forget, he was away for the winters. And then when he came back, as he got fired, he found Tom in the house.
well, I
With
think
Marge.
she was with a man finally who was kind and nice to
Right.
her.
I agree.
It's so very appealing, which certainly can understand. But I think the community, the feeling of community really, really spoke volumes here in terms of helping them actually move to a higher ground with the problem.
Who was your favorite character? Mine
What'd you
was
say?
Marge.
Oh, we
Marge,
loved
Marge, I
Oh,
was just going to
yes.
say,
If
if she hadn't stepped in and sent him off to the pipeline, and given them a little bit of a rest from each other, he might have killed her in the interim. But yet, when he came back, I guess he was fired after his time in the pipeline. They fired him, and he came back, and then it all started again.
She saved their lives.
She
did.
absolutely
My favorite character.
agree.
Favorite. She
Did
just
anybody watch
said it like it was.
Did anybody watch Night Court?
Yes.
Well, in my mind, and I always watch the movie as I'm reading the book, I watch it in my head. I pictured the woman, the large black woman who was like the bailiff on Night Court. You
Oh.
remember? She was real sarcastic. That's who I pictured. But well,
it was draining to see how weak the mother was throughout the book.
She was.
Up until the very end. I don't want to have any spoiler alerts in case somebody is motivated to read the book after.
No, I think we all
No.
read it.
But the fact is that Large Marge, every time she came into the scene, you felt this energy and relief, because watching the two women be completely victimized and never be able to take any kind of control of their lives. And the mother made bad choices at every juncture possible, from the time when, at the very beginning of the book, it's clear that the mother is only 30 years old and the daughter is 13. She became pregnant in high school and didn't even finish.
They say that.
And, got pregnant when she was 16. But she chooses to stay with the husband, but at the expense of the daughter throughout.
Right, yes.
They're moving from place to place so the daughter can never have any relationships or connections, never finish school. They just don't seem to care about her or care about her enough ever. It was exhausting.
It was all about him.
Yes, it was all about him. Yes,
No.
but Large Marge at least.
All about the mother too.
No, but I think all the changes and everything that they made and moving to Alaska is it was all about him.
Yeah.
Were you surprised to see still a lot of tenderness between Ernst and Cora? And I was wondering if that's common with battered women, and that she sort of disassociates herself from the reality of the abuse because she tries to only either remember the good times or concentrate on the positive traits that he had.
I
Along
think
those
that,
lines,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Along those lines, at the beginning of the book, as I started to reread it yesterday, they have a reference to the Patty Hearst.
Yes.
Yes.
And I thought, boy, that's kind of prophetic. You know, she's got this, she began to get this, what, I don't know what the syndrome is.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, where
Thank you,
you
Penny.
begin to love who's
Right, your
who's
abuser.
past you.
Yeah,
Right.
your
I
captor.
thought that was very weird.
I think
Well, you bring up an interesting thing. Oh, okay, Lisa, 1 second. Let's talk about some of the historical facts that took place in 1974 and gave him the impetus to leave society in the United States and go off into the great unknown. So Lisa, after you say what you want to say, I would like to talk about some of what took place during that time period.
Okay, well, yeah, well, I don't want to derail your question, but basically I'm just kind of going back to what I said earlier when we were talking about Marge and her relationship with her daughter and all the relationships within this entire novel, is that it was about unconditional love. No matter what he did to her, Cora put up with. No matter what happened to Lenny between her father and her mother and their relationship, it was fine. It was unconditional. She loved them until the end when she hated him. And then you look at Matthew again. No matter what happened to Matthew, there was that level of unconditional love throughout the book. And I did see that was a big piece of it, is that no one focused on the reality of their relationship in ways that they were being hurt by it. And as Beth said in the beginning, you know, as you're reading it, you're thinking, I wish they would do this. I wish they would do that, because they were making so many choices that we knew were going to be destructive choices.
But, you know, when it comes to abuse, a lot of times it's the person who's being abused that thinks that they're the cause of the problem.
Well, she did.
And
They feel
I
guilt
think
and
she
shame
kept
about it.
thinking that, and so she kept going back thinking that, you know, I'm creating the problem, and so she would love him and forgive him over and over again. It was a typical reaction to, you know, abuse by many people. But I think it would have gone on and on if it hadn't been for the community. I don't think she had the strength to really change it.
Right. Agreed.
But
Okay.
she did have her breaking point, as we know, when he started to beat up on Lenny.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So Cookie, back to your question.
Okay. Well, I just want to throw out some things as historical facts that took place during 1974, and then people can comment on those events. In 1974, we had the Vietnam War still going on. We had Roe v. Wade, you know, overturning the ban on abortion. We had the Watergate scandal where Nixon resigns August 9th, 1974. We had Patty Hearst kidnapping. We had bombings by the IRA. We had the massacre at the Munich Olympics. And we had lovable Charles Manson, you know, doing what he chose to do.
It makes 2020 look wonderful.
That's right.
Well,
So,
Can't go that far.
no,
well,
right.
I mean, all throughout every period of time, there's always upheavals and catastrophic events. And would anyone like to comment on all those things that took place then and why he might want to? I mean, you know, I'm sure everybody saw the movie Harvey the Rabbit. Remember, with James Stewart? And everyone thinks he's crazy because he sees the white rabbit and nobody else does.
Right.
And then we say he might be the only normal one because nobody else seems to get what's going on. And I could look at Lenny's father and, you know, I mean, to be upset by all these things, aren't we all upset right now? And half of us ready to like say, we're ready to move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Cookie,
I
I also think in the 1970s was the beginning of the battered women's movement. And I think the
Yes.
first home
Yes.
was established, I think it was in London, and right afterwards into the United States and many, many states in the United States.
Mhm.
Yes. Any other comments?
Well, I know that even towards the middle of the book, when they were trying to modernize their community, he did not want it. He wanted it to stay the way it was because of outside pressures. I mean, he didn't want tourists. He didn't want the, he wanted it to be the way it was. But we know that can happen. And anyway, I think how she wrote the book sort of was indicative of maybe what he was internalizing. Too much for him to deal with after being a POW. He wasn't just in Vietnam. He was a POW for a number of years. So,
Right.
And he wanted to be alone, and he wanted to wall off the entire world.
Oh yeah, he built
Yes.
he built that wall and that fence. Oh yeah, that sounds familiar. Right.
I think there was
Right.
there was a lot in the book that highlighted the position of women at the time. And I think we forget, even though all of us lived through it, there's a scene at the beginning of the book when the mother goes to a bank to try to get some money.
Yes.
Because finds that he's cleaned out their bank accounts, and she tries to open a credit card and she's told that a woman can only get a credit card if a man will co-sign with her, either her father or her husband, which is unbelievable. But
true.
there is this undercurrent going through the book of, if she left the husband, would there be adequate protection for her, or at some point very soon wouldn't, even if there were a restraining order, there is not enough protection. And I did stories about that as a journalist, where there were battered women had a restraining order and the husband would come and kill them very quickly. The police did not protect them adequately. And it's not necessarily not the case anymore, but it certainly was then.
Even when
I
she
looked
killed
up
him,
yesterday. I'm sorry. I looked up yesterday about abuse, domestic abuse, and interestingly, over 70% of injuries occur after the wife leaves. 70%.
Oh, really? Wow.
So
That's
that's one of the reasons, besides the financial, obviously, that women don't leave these relationships.
yeah, they don't want to be killed.
Right.
He'll come
Right.
after her.
Right.
But even when after she kills him, there was an issue of nobody's going to believe a woman
That's
that
right.
it's self-defense.
Right.
Well, did anyone in this group read Wally Lamb's book about I don't remember what book group I read it, about all
we
the,
read it here.
The women in prison.
yeah.
Yeah.
We read it.
Read that all the time.
We read that in our group book. Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right, and they're sent to jail for striking back at the abuser.
Right.
What does that tell you?
And that's why they did what they did with his body.
Right.
Right.
Because they thought they were going to go, or that she was going to spend the rest of her life in jail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I also, do you see some parallels? Like, for instance, we're talking about her being an abused woman, but look at the Me Too movement now. People are finally stepping out and sticking up for themselves. I mean, hopefully there's going to be some progress. Rita, do you want to say something?
No.
Oh, you're screaming.
I'm saying yes with my head.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And I did some research on this, and it said, the battered women syndrome comes under the umbrella of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's as such, in the psychiatric, in the journal that names them. So yeah, battered women syndrome is a subtype of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Not surprised.
And it says here, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience violence from an intimate partner. And 15% of all violent crime involves an intimate partner. Pretty scary.
Yeah, right.
Very
Okay.
scary.
Yeah. And then, and moving along, there's another theme here about veterans. I mean, the term post-traumatic stress disorder didn't come into usage until, I think the late 70s. It came about as a result of the Vietnam War. But look at all this, the men who were in World War I and World War II, and
Right.
that even a known psychological condition. You were just a drunk or a drug abuser, but with no connection.
Yeah. I had an uncle who suffered from PSD after World War II, but we didn't know what to call it. I mean, he wasn't a drunk, but he just couldn't get his life together. Just couldn't.
When we were kids, we had a teacher who had this, and we used to say he was shell-shocked. I'm so embarrassed that we made fun of him,
Right. Yeah.
But at least in World War I and World War II, the soldiers came back as heroes. They didn't come back as heroes after the Vietnam War, and I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Right. Well, it says here, in 1989, the VA National Center for Traumatic Stress Disorders was created by an act of Congress. But that wasn't until 1989. That's kind of
It's a long time.
Yeah, so much after the fact.
And it was officially recognized by the American Psychological Association in 1980 as, a condition to be recognized, but the center wasn't until 1989. So, okay, I think if you guys are willing, I've got a lot of discussion questions.
Go ahead.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. I have to help my husband with something. He's on a Zoom also, and he's having problems. Okay, I'll be back.
How would you handle life in Alaska? What would you find most challenging about living?
The isolation. Well, actually, we're living into isolation right now, and it's not a good feeling.
But at least we have Zoom.
Right.
We have a lot.
That's true.
So,
We have a lot
Cookie,
more than most.
Are you talking about Alaska during like 1974? Because I would have turned around and left after I had to.
I'm with you, Ruth.
most people did.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh my God, as I read what they found when they walked into the cabin for the first time, I mean, I don't expect the book to end there and say, okay, let's go back to Seattle.
Well, and Lenny wasn't the type of woman that was used to that kind of lifestyle, but she gave in and said, yes, she'll live with it. But she grew up with luxury, as we read later on in the book.
Now, that was Cora you're talking about.
Cora.
Cora.
I'm not Lenny. I mean Cora, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. So something else that I thought was interesting was that Lenny talked a lot about hope, and that hope will break you, and that you shouldn't ever hope for anything better because you'll be disappointed. And I noticed that did you feel like the characters, any of them, had any hope for the future?
Marge's motto was, "It is what it is," and her,
Right. Who else said that?
Deal with it.
Right.
Well, I felt Tom Walker had hope. I mean, even though he lost his wife, he was looking forward to building up the town and, just in general. But he was also a man of means, which most of them were not. And so maybe he had more options available to him.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But I didn't know. I was surprised that Letty went back. I know her mother had died. I didn't think, I was surprised that she would consider going back there. Now, of course, when she went back and she didn't even know if Matthew was alive or not.
Right.
Right. She had not been in touch with anyone in all those years. And she had his child, of course. I don't know, that was.
I didn't understand that at all. That really troubled me. She was so in love with him to not just leave and not know whether he's alive or dead or recovered or anything. It was bizarre.
Trying to escape getting in trouble for murdering Ern.
Yeah, but she could have written to Marge or
Yeah.
She could have figured something out. That to me was
Why couldn't she have called Matthew's father? I never understood that either.
Yeah,
Why
I
she
agree.
was
Could be
so in the
found.
dark.
Right.
Yeah,
All
right.
those-
And
And,
it's
you know,
unfair.
and Tom Walker would have just called the governor and it would have been over. Like
Well,
it was at the
well,
end.
Well,
And
that's
she
what
didn't know
happened.
I mean, they had changed their names and were living incognito, and she did not want to take any chances to alert anybody that they were still alive. They were living,
Mhm.
But
you know,
love,
they were trying to make people believe that they had died. And the loyalty that Lenny felt to her mother over her own best interests, I guess, was both touching and heartbreaking and horrifying.
And disturbing.
As I alluded to earlier, my father was abusive to my mother, not to the extent, I will say right now, that this character in the book was, but verbally and yes, physically on a routine basis, And you just live with it and get used to it. But I lived in constant fear that my father was going to kill my mother when I went away for any reason. When I went away to college, I lived night and day, waking up in the middle of the night thinking, is he going to kill her? And the level of wanting to protect your mother is so overwhelming to anything you can imagine. I mean, just imagine, you know?
That's tough. That's really tough.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And we saw that play out in the book.
Wait, but Patty, did you ever fear for yourself that anger would turn on you?
Always. Yes. Yeah. But for the most part, it didn't. It was all directed at her and occasionally my brother, also my brother, I will say. But when my parents went to the movies, I went with them every time. I was afraid to leave them alone together. I just wanted to be there to make sure something different didn't happen. I couldn't sleep at night. I was listening all the time, any noise in the house. Was he hitting her, or what was that noise?
Did you ever tell anybody?
Yeah.
Well, I think the most frustrating thing to me in the book was that we always wish that there was somebody who would come along and help us. And in the book, there's large margin, there's Tom Walker, and they do something, and they in fact get him arrested, and he's in jail, and the mother doesn't press charge. That is like the turning point in the book for me in a way. It's like I as much as all of you were probably reading the book hating the father, I found the father to be a two-dimensional character, very, very, without any redeeming qualities. The fact is, nobody is like that. He probably, if he were a real person, would have some likability and some charm and some good moments, and she didn't give him any at all. I just hated the mother. I hated the mother for as much as I sympathized with her. I hated her for never taking any small opportunity to help her daughter, even if she wasn't going to help herself.
I was angry at her. And here she had the ability to just not to press charges while he was locked up.
Yes.
And she let him out. I mean, that's sick.
Yeah, that is sick.
Do you think that's fairly typical of people who are abused, though?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I think so.
I wouldn't know. I hope, thank God.
Yeah, but listen to what Gail said, 70% of the actual crimes occur after,
Right.
so it would make sense.
I just saw something on the news yesterday of some woman who left her husband and he killed her. It was just yesterday. I mean, I think it's more common than we like to think.
It is.
Right.
Do you think anyone besides Ern suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder? Think about all the characters in the book.
I think we talked to.
There was Mad Earl.
Yes, Mad Girl.
Someone raise your hands because I can't tell who's talking.
Okay, we're back.
Mad Earl, wasn't he suffering from? He was the one that fenced.
Oh.
He was the one that wouldn't let anybody on his property. He'd go out there with a shotgun, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And Ernst loved him.
and didn't
Yeah.
he,
They were compadres.
Misery loves company.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Okay, Sue, did you want to say something?
No, I said misery loves company.
Okay, Lisa, I
Well-
think you had,
well, I think we referred to this before, that Cora had PTSD from having all the beatings from her husband and living a life
Oh,
of,
interesting.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
and what about Matthew witnessing his mother's drowning?
Oh,
Oh,
Hmm.
yeah.
If you recall, he went to another town and went to a psychiatrist for help.
Yes, yeah.
He was,
Well, he went to Fairbanks, I think, to
Right.
live with the maternal side of his family after his mother drowned.
Right.
That
Yeah.
was terrible. That was so heart-wrenching.
It was, and he couldn't get over it because
and he felt responsible.
yes.
I don't blame him to feel not be able to get over it. It's just
But-
heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
okay, Sue?
but
Sue?
but there was an example of a healthy way of solving a problem.
Yes, yes.
Because that
Yeah.
family, knew what to do and, did it, in a very positive way.
And what about Large Marge?
Yeah, I think she,
Hmm.
whether she suffered from PTSD?
Yeah, wasn't her sister murdered?
Her sister, yes, her sister had been murdered.
Oh,
Yeah.
I forgot.
Was
that.
it by
I
an
forgot about that.
decided
Was
she'd
it by
had
an
enough.
ex-husband? I think her sister was murdered by an ex-husband.
Yes.
But she reacted in a different way. She took it as a motivation to take action as opposed to
Right.
become a victim or become aggressive herself.
I think she
Uh-huh.
felt life is too short. I'm going to live what way I want to. I'm not going to be part of the corporate. I mean, she was an attorney.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, she
Wherever
was.
she was.
Yeah, she
And
was.
she must have put up with a lot of garbage. And
Yeah.
I think she felt life is too short. Just go for it.
Sue?
Go where you want to go.
Sue?
Coming to Alaska gave people freedom, a lot of space, but it also for her and, gave her the freedom to be who she wanted to be as well. And, I think she really became the healthy person that she wanted to be after what happened to her sister.
Right.
I mean, she saw, she lived it. And so she was able to, tell Cora, what the outcome probably would be for her as well.
I
Right.
think she was also the star of the town.
Yes.
Because she had the general store where everyone had to go in and buy their things that they
Right.
needed. And she was so supportive to everyone, that, she did rebuild herself and she made herself important again.
People respected her.
Absolutely.
And I think part of it was that the traumatic experience with her sister didn't psychologically damage her, where some of the other characters were damaged. So I wouldn't say she had PTSD because she wasn't damaged by it. She was bolstered to help make a difference with Cora or with any other difficult situation that she encountered. And she was a tremendous support.
I kind of idolized Marge. I kind of wished there was a Marge in my life where I and say, Marge, what should I do about this? And she'd cut through all the bullshit.
Right.
Give me
And get
an
right to it.
answer. She was good.
Hey,
She
Beth,
said-
that's called your shrink. You just have
Right.
to pay for it.
Oh, no. They're not as good. Marge was a better one.
Yes.
But
We're
better
hoping
than a
that
shrink. I mean, I think that when a woman takes charge like that, when AOC made that speech recently on the floor, and they played it over and over again, and I listened to it over and over again, and I felt so validated and energized. I took some action in my life I haven't been able to take in a long time just because of that speech. I think it's contagious when women stand up for each other and stand up for themselves. Maybe it's not just women, but for us it is just women, isn't it?
Right.
But they didn't in the book. It didn't help any of the women there. Cora and Lenny were not bolstered by Large Marge as much as Marge was willing to help.
she kept them alive longer than
Yes, she, right.
That's true,
she
but
stepped in. Yeah,
but they didn't take advantage of the support that she was willing to
They
provide.
wouldn't allow
true.
it.
that's true.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. They wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't take
She
it.
had a lot of patience with them, you know, she really did. She knew what would be helpful to them and still stood by them even when they weren't holding on to the gauntlet, you know, and they let it
Well,
down.
exactly. And I think part of it was she saw that in her sister, that her sister stayed and she stayed and she stayed. So I think she understood the situation that Cora was in better than someone else might have. But I thought one of the things that surprised me about the book was when Lenny confessed. That,
That she confessed to killing her
Yeah.
father.
yes, that
Yeah.
was a shocker.
She
Yeah.
It was sort
I
of
think she was
cathartic. I didn't
very
think it was
naive.
Yes, she needed to go forward.
She needed to
didn't-
cleanse
She was
herself. It
also,
was bothering. It was eating at her.
it was.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm
exactly.
watching a mystery now where somebody confesses to, or is toying with confessing to something, and it's all about catharsis.
Right.
Mhm.
She needed to let go of it.
Can I just ask,
No
could
matter the
any of you have
consequences.
lived, that was a wonderful community that they lived in.
Yeah.
But
Very supportive.
could any of you pick up and live in Alaska in that type of a community?
No.
I'm going to tell you, I
No.
could not
No.
at all.
No,
You remember the part in the book, I don't know why this stuck with me, and I read it years ago and I sort of reread it quickly about a month ago. But what has always stuck in my mind, do you remember the part where Lenny's father, I think it was him, made her eat
The heart.
the heart of that rat?
Oh,
yes.
I was so sick.
Awful.
I mean, I can't get
That
that out
was
of my
cruel.
mind. It was
That's
just
so
so,
cruel.
He was trying to toughen her up. He was a POW.
absolutely, I
Oh my
understand
God.
from
For him, it
listen,
was.
but could anyone live
No,
No.
I was
with
gagging
animals
reading
at
it.
night? I could not. I'm just too much of a
Oh, I
coward, I
could.
think. You
I
could.
No.
yeah, no, I liked that part of the book. I really liked the
Oh,
part no, not the part where she ate the heart, but the part about getting down to basics and learning survival.
Well,
And
that's important.
I
doing
can't
whatever.
stand.
No, I liked it, but I certainly wouldn't live there with my husband because he wants to call the handyman. So you have to live there. You have to live there with somebody who's willing to have skills to learn how to kill a moose and whatever. You do what you have to do. Unfortunately, where we're going now, where we live, is we make things complicated for ourselves.
And we're
That's
also
why I like
soft.
nature so much.
It's
because
very
we do what
soft.
to
We
do.
have everything we want.
And
We
we're
didn't
still
have the
And-
air conditioning last week.
Everything.
right.
Right.
And more.
And when we go
Things
to
you
the
don't
market
need.
and buy meat, we're fussy over, the cut. We just make our lives so complicated.
Or
Yep.
make our lives easy. I mean, if you saw how many packages arrive from Amazon on my doorstep, unfortunately my husband does, you would know I'm not built for living in Alaska unless they deliver there.
Yeah.
They do.
Well,
I would find that refreshing. To live the way we were sort of intended, more natural. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
rather make my own soap and
butter.
I don't.
I'd rather have
me.
takeout. I'm not
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that.
I like my comforts of home.
well, I'm not
Me
saying I
too.
don't like it, but I think we keep it's sort of like greed. We want more and more and more, rather than putting up with what we have. Like Marge says, Large Marge says, deal with it.
How would you guys deal with the long periods of darkness in Alaska? I mean, that's
Really?
another factor. I don't think I could take that.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
they do, yeah.
Alana lived in Alaska for a year, but she didn't live in the Kenai. She lived in where'd she live? In Juneau, and it was hard in the winter. And she doesn't have total darkness there. it's a little further south. But it was hard, she said.
Yeah.
Rita, what was your impression
Wait.
of that town, Rita? When you
Well,
went to Keno?
when I went there, it was interesting. I went to visit a friend. Well, actually, it was Alana's roommate in college came from there. And her mother invited us to visit. So we drove down to the Kenai, to Homer, and the woman, Diane, she and her husband, right after college, they came from LA and decided they wanted to go to the New Frontier.
Right.
And they actually drove also all the way up to Alaska, but they didn't go, they went way, 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 way north of Fairbanks, way up there. I can't remember the name of the town. There wasn't even a road to go in. It was, you had to take a snowmobile or take a plane in. She actually had a child. They were young and they were, idealistic. They thought, like you are, Beth, thinking right now. They wanted to get down to the nitty gritty, and they had a child. They actually had their first child there. There was no place to have the baby. They had to actually take a water plane or a plane to fly out so she can have a baby in the nearest town, which I don't know how far away that was. And they decided maybe this was not a good place to raise a child because there were no hospitals, there were no doctors, there was nothing there. So they ended up down, way, way down the Kenai Peninsula, which also had nothing down there. And they lived in this really beautiful home on top of the mountain. And in the interim, her husband died. So she's raising now 2 little children in this town that was actually very much like the book in the beginning, because there was nothing there when they first moved there. There was nothing. By the time we got there and went to visit them, which was now probably 20 years ago, there was, has anybody been to the Kenai?
No.
Okay.
No.
You know, it talks about, there's like this
where's the inside passage? Isn't that, I think I was.
No, that's not even near, no.
No.
If you look at the map of Alaska, and you know where Anchorage and then Seward is right below, there's like a spit that goes down a long way. Yeah, a peninsula. Okay, they're way down there where nobody goes there. And this town composed of this like spit, which had on either side, you walked along, the whole thing was maybe 40 feet wide. And it had either side were little outside, it was very much like the book, had these little like a little convenience store, like what do you call it, a general store.
General store.
They had a couple of fishing people take you out on fishing boats, and they had one place that took the fish you caught and they would wrap it for you, or
I want to go visit.
That was pretty much it. And then there was that little island that they lived on, which you took a boat over to. You still had to take a boat over there. There was no bridge. And it was very remote. So there was nothing down there when I was there. We had fun, but we didn't have to live there.
Right.
We were there, we were having fun. We took a boat out, we went fishing. It was great, but it was beautiful. I mean, utterly beautiful.
I think we have to have a field trip. This is a field trip every once in a while.
Field trip. There was nothing there, and I don't think it's changed much. I mean, there's tourism, but the tourism down there are people who go fishing, basically, or hiking.
Right.
I remember one night we were sitting in her house, and the front of the house was, as I said, way up on a hill, and it was all glass. So you had this unbelievably majestic, it was just beautiful view there. And Marty said to Diane, "Oh my God, this is fabulous." She said, "Come in the winter."
You get used to
they
it.
can't go in. Yeah.
All right, and Sue wanted to say something. Sue, do you remember?
Well, when there's no light, a lot of people who have depression really suffer.
That's right.
And I would think it would be very difficult for them to live, certainly in a place such as Alaska, unless they had the lights that they needed inside the house.
Right. Alaska has a very high rate of depression, alcoholism, and suicide.
So
Remember that. And why? It's dark.
Because of the light.
Yeah.
Right.
Toby?
Right. In November, when it gets dark very early, I know people, not myself, I know because I'm usually in Florida in November, but I know people here that suffer from seasonal affective disorder, which is depression, because of the lack of light. And after June 21st, when they turn the clocks back, I'm noticing every day it's getting a little darker. And now in August, I'm finding that it gets dark before 8 o'clock, way before 8 o'clock, where when I first came back from Florida in June, it was light till 8:30, a quarter
Right.
of 9.
Right.
So I'm
But
just
it
saying
is-
that people do suffer, even
And you know,
here, even
and you know,
here in the United
Toby, Toby, you know what? They also suffer. I remember when Alana was living in Alaska, she used to tell me that it was really difficult because in the summer there is no darkness.
Right.
Right.
The
It's light.
opposite.
It's light all night.
Lack
I
of
can
sleep.
remember. I can remember when we were in Homer. I can remember Marty and I were sitting out reading outside with no light at 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was
Wow.
as if
Yeah.
it was like afternoon. So you know, you have the same thing when you eat. You know, we used to forget to eat dinner. You know, 11 o'clock at night. Oh my God, you know, we never ate dinner.
Yeah, but would you prefer that? Like when we were in St. Petersburg on a cruise, we were out sitting out on our deck at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and
Right.
it was sunlight. I would prefer that. If
Well,
I
yeah,
had
you would, but live in it.
Yeah.
Live in it for weeks or months with no darkness.
Very
you know.
difficult.
I learned, that's my first introduction to face mask. What do you call it? Not face masks. Sleeping masks.
Oh, sleeping.
Yeah.
I never knew about those before, but when we went to
Right.
in Alaska, they that was one of the amenities in the inn, and it was amazing because it was light out when you went to bed.
Yeah.
Mm.
True, true.
Okay, so I had a couple other, I don't know, Stephanie, how are we doing on time?
I think we have time for maybe 2 more.
Okay, well, I wanted to ask you, what different types of love do you see in this book? There are several.
There's neighborly love. There's
Yes, that's one.
Community, yeah,
love-
community.
love
Community.
between
Community
husband
love.
and wife, love between
Child and mother.
grandparents
Mother and daughter.
grandchildren and children and parents.
And a man and a woman.
There's a
Lenny and
separate,
Matthew.
and between women, there's a love. There's the
Well, the
camaraderie of
daughter,
the
the
friends.
daughter and the mother. The daughter and the mother.
And
That was
just
very
friendship.
strong.
Yes.
well, there's mother love, there's neighborly love, there's
Right.
possessive love, and there's obsessive love.
Mhm.
And there's distorted love. And I think that
Yeah.
Lenny has this thought throughout the book, maybe this is what love is, maybe that is what love is, but it's always something that is twisted, and her parents are demonstrating to her obsessive, sick, destructive love rather than any kind of healthy form of it, unfortunately.
Okay,
But she
Sue?
knew that it wasn't right. I
She
mean,
did.
she could see
She
that.
read.
She could see that it wasn't right.
And she read a lot. She read all these books that she
Yes.
would see. So she knew.
Let me read you a quote, and you can comment upon it. This is from Lenny. A girl was like a kite. Without her mother's strong, steady hold on the string, she might float away and be lost somewhere among the clouds. Do you think Cora serves such a role?
It's crazy. That is the quote that I underlined that I was going to read also in this whole nearly 500-page book. Isn't that interesting? I read in the notes after the book that the author's mother died young. I think she said when she was 46, and that this is something that she is still trying to come to terms with and dealing with. And yes, I mean, that quote really does sum up the book in some sense of what was going on through this whole thing.
Right.
I think she did hold on to her very tightly. I mean,
Yes.
I think her mother always had her back, and vice versa. When she wasn't always so strong herself.
But
Does anybody think that the latter part of the book, where she goes to live with her mother, is a weak part of the book?
yes,
I
I agree.
sort of felt things unraveling when she went to her mother and lived a life under a presumed name, and it just seemed flat.
Did you think that her mother Once Lenny moves back with the child to Alaska, do you think the grandparents ever see her or the child again? I don't think so.
And I'm saying, you
No,
have to
it's
hope
just-
they do.
I hope they do, but I bet they don't.
They
And
certainly
I
Well,
feel sorry for them.
Oh, I don't know. I
feel
thought
sorry
of
for them.
that. Yeah.
no FaceTime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think they had
No.
means and that there probably would be a relationship.
I hope.
That
They were
did
always
have a
there to
relationship.
rescue them.
That's right.
Mhm.
I-
Okay, but, Right.
I wondered, this is your baby, Cookie, but I wondered if we could talk about the title very briefly, because the fact is it does refer to, I think Alaska is called the Great Alone, but, and I thought of that because the point of the book that you were just referring to, when she is living under an assumed name with the mother and they're pretending that they were dead, and she's gone to college under an assumed name and everything, and all I could think was, she is now going to be alone for the rest of her life, because how could you form a relationship with somebody not being able to tell who you really are?
Right.
How could you ever have a marriage?
Right.
You
that-
can't.
You can't.
You can't.
Mm.
And maybe
a
that's
lot
why
of the
she went back to
characters
Alaska.
had their own alone.
That's
I
what
thought
I
meant
was
to a
thinking.
lot of the characters had
Any-
that. Even
Wait,
Big
has
Mark
anybody-
was alone.
Well, that's why she
Is
went back to
anybody-
Alaska, so she could,
Right.
so she could be herself again.
Right.
Has
Yeah.
anybody here read that Gail Sheehy book years ago, Passages?
No.
No.
I
Well,
don't remember.
in
I read
there,
some of
she
it.
talks about how no matter what, everybody goes through life alone. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
from
I think the
alone,
title
you
meant
die
all the
alone.
characters.
You take your own path.
And I think when she went back to Alaska, when Lenny did, I think that's when she didn't feel alone anymore. She needed that community again. And so even though there were many times when she felt alone, that was what she was looking for in the beginning and at the end.
Okay, I want you to also talk about a paradox that's in the book. It says all this time, Dad had taught Lenny how dangerous the outside world was, but the truth was the biggest danger of all was in her home.
Inside.
That's right.
And
That's
here
right.
he had made a wall to keep out the dangerous world where he was the danger, really.
Right. He was keeping it all in.
I thought he was really trying to keep out the walkers, right?
Yes.
Probably
I think
that was it.
everybody-
Yeah.
Everyone.
I
But it
think
was
he
certainly
wasn't in his
symbolic.
right mind, and he envisioned that they're going to be taken over by the government and so on.
Correct.
I know.
He
I
was
know.
just insane at that point.
Everybody was his enemy.
Yeah.
Right.
I worked
He
with
was
someone like
paranoid.
that before
Good.
9/11. Oh God, he was always scheming and thinking about the world coming to an end. And I mean, it was really draining working with him. I cannot imagine living with
I can
someone like that.
Well, there are people now who have bomb shelters and they have
Yeah.
food preserved down there
Right.
because they live with the
Survivalists.
fear.
Alana has a neighbor next door that built a bomb shelter underneath their house, and it's fully supplied. Fully supplied.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a group. There's survivalists. They have them in West Hartford everywhere.
Mm.
Right. And they think we're crazy because we don't have all that.
Right.
And they will be the only ones to survive. And maybe they're right. I don't know.
Wait, Sue
God, I hope not.
wants to say something. Sue?
Yeah, tell Alana to keep being friends with the neighbor.
I always tell you a place to go.
Right.
Thank you, Cookie. You did a great job.
Thank you.
You did a wonderful
I
job.
want
Thank
to
you.
stop it.
you.
I'm just one last saying, which I thought was hysterical. It says, you know what they say about finding a man in Alaska? The odds are
Yeah.
good, but the goods are
All
odd.
right.
Wait a
That
minute.
was great.
Where did Alana find her husband?
Alaska.
Alaska.
We make an exception.
That is
Okay,
hysterical.
Stephanie,
Great.
so
All of you ladies are just amazing. I can't imagine anyone not wanting to read this book now. Just amazing. I just want to just comment one thing. And I tried, but I couldn't get a word in edgewise.
You should see when we're all in the same room.
I can only
Yeah.
imagine. And I told you, I was just going to let them fly, and boy, did they fly.
Right.
Gail, that statistic you mentioned about abuse and 70% of it happening after a woman leaves, it reminds me of the other statistic, which is just so disturbing, that the most dangerous person to any woman, any of us and any women in our lives, is a woman's husband, boyfriend, etc. They are so much more of a danger, of a threat. So this whole book is all about that, whether it was, an abusive husband, father, etc. So,
Right.
I guess I would love to know, if I had a question for all of you, what can you take away from this? What might you be able to do differently? I think for myself, like Big Marge, I would love to think that in my future, if I see something, that see something, say something,
Right.
that's kind of
Right.
my takeaway, is that I feel like I want to be Big Marge for someone. I want to be, somebody who helps. Does anybody else have something maybe that you took away from the book how did it change you? Any thoughts?
I think when somebody commented that we're all alone, for me, what I took away from it is we have to be good to ourselves. We have to keep that in mind. We can't sacrifice so much
We are.
that we don't have a quality life ourselves.
Good. I like that.
Yeah. And I think we need community on the
Yeah.
opposite side.
Yeah.
We don't need a big community. We just need a really caring, loving community.
Right.
Like our book group.
Like our book
I think
group.
that's
Like we
one of the,
value our book group, right? That's
And
what we
never-
have each other.
Absolutely.
Never
Absolutely.
lose a sense of self.
Yes.
That, absolutely.
I think that's one of the problems that the pandemic has fostered upon people, that we're all isolated, and people don't want to be isolated.
No,
Mhm.
you're right. Well, I'm thrilled that we're not isolated today. That we're all,
Yes.
even if we're not in Hollywood squares, but you promised me that when this is all over, I'm coming there for the food, and we'll just
That would be great.
and let it roll, because
And we'll let you talk a little more.
a little more.
Right, yeah.
And
I'll let you
when
talk.
will this be shown?
We're going to be, this will be airing on Wednesday at 7:00, and I will be sending you all the links so that you
Oh,
have
good.
to watch along.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But you
Great.
were all absolutely fantastic. Great to see such community, and that you all bolster each other, which is
Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank